I didn't believe him when he said it. She's dangerous. He said it like a warning, the kind you throw out casually over coffee, half smiling, but meaning every word underneath. At the time, I just shrugged, pretending I wasn't curious. But curiosity has teeth. It bites softly first. The first time I saw her again, she was bent over a stack of used paperbacks at the bookstore. The old ceiling fan above her clicked in a lazy rhythm, stirring up dust and the faint smell of old paper. She wasn't supposed to be there, at least not in my afternoon, not in my head again, but there she was. Mara. She looked the same and nothing like I remembered. The years had added something impossible to describe. Not age, not wear, something quieter. Her hair, darker now, tied low at her neck. A pair of reading glasses slid halfway down her nose. She was mouthing words as she read. It made me forget what I'd come in for. I must have stood there too long because she looked up. The kind of look that catches you mid-thought and leaves you nowhere to hide. Eli, she said after a pause, the syllables slow, like tasting something familiar but unexpected. You look different. I laughed too quickly. You look exactly the same. A lie, and she knew it. Her smile barely appeared, just a small lift at the corner of her mouth, but it carried the same calm authority she had in the classroom years ago. She could silence a room with it. We talked, if you could call it that. Mostly, she asked the kind of questions that made me answer more than I meant to. How long I'd been back in town. What I was doing now. If I still wrote. I asked nothing back, just nodded, listening to the sound of her voice more than the words. The light through the front window kept shifting, soft gold spilling over her hair, her hands resting on the counter. I noticed a thin silver ring she wasn't wearing before. I noticed how still she was. Not frozen, just deliberate, like everything she did had a reason. When she reached to hand me a book, her fingers brushed mine. Just that, a touch that probably meant nothing. But it stopped me. I think she noticed because she withdrew her hand a moment too late. You shouldn't look at people that way, she said, not unkindly. What way? Like you're searching for something. She turned then, walking toward the register, leaving me with the faint sound of her heels on the wood floor and the smell of her perfume. Faint, unfamiliar, and utterly distracting. I paid for a book I didn't need, a collection of essays I'd never read. I just didn't want to leave before she did. Outside, the sky had turned overcast. A few drops of rain darkened the pavement, but I stood under the awning, flipping pages, pretending to read. Through the window, I saw her tidying the display, moving with quiet precision. Then, she looked up again. Our eyes met through the glass, and neither of us moved for a heartbeat too long. That's when I finally understood what my friend meant. She's dangerous. Not the kind of danger that burns fast or loud, but the kind that lingers, seeps into the corners of your thoughts, and makes ordinary days feel slightly off-center. I walked away eventually, book in hand, rain tapping lightly on my shoulders. But I kept thinking about that moment. Her voice, the unfinished look in her eyes, and the strange, steady pulse in my chest whispering that I'd already taken the risk. She called the shop 3 days later. Said her car was making a sound, something about a belt, or maybe the engine. Her tone was steady, but there was a pause before she said my name, like she was deciding whether to use it. By the time I saw her again, the late afternoon light was stretching long across the garage floor. Dust floated in the air, catching sunlight in small, nervous flashes. I wiped my hands on a rag, half hoping she'd cancel, half dreading she might. Her car rolled in slowly, an older model, elegant but worn, like something that belonged to her by right, not choice. She stepped out wearing a linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and dark glasses she didn't really need inside. Still here? She asked, glancing around the shop. Someone's got to keep the engines alive, I said. She smiled, just barely. You always had a poetic way of ruining practical things. That line should have made me laugh. It didn't. It stayed with me. The way she said always, like she remembered more than she wanted to admit. I lifted the hood while she stood a few steps away, arms crossed, pretending not to watch. I could feel her eyes, though, trailing over my hands. The motion, the silence between us. You can sit, I said, nodding toward the stool by the wall. I'm fine. But a few minutes later, she did sit. Not because she was tired, I think, but because standing meant acknowledging she was waiting. When I looked up, I saw her studying a small framed photo I kept near the tools, my father's. "You look like him," she said quietly. I hadn't told her that before. "You used to talk about him in class. The way you'd pause, same kind of stillness." Her voice wavered just slightly, like something old had risen without permission. Then she stopped talking, as if she'd said too much. A drop of oil ran down my wrist, and she handed me a cloth before I asked. Her fingers brushed mine again, that same careful, delayed retreat. "Thank you," I murmured. "For what?" "For pretending you don't notice when I stare." She exhaled through her nose, not smiling this time. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because people might start believing you mean them." Her tone was calm, but her hand tightened slightly around the edge of her sleeve, a tell she probably didn't realize I caught. When the job was done, she lingered by the open bay door, watching the street. The air smelled like rain again. "You've changed," she said, almost to herself. "You don't fill silence the way you used to." "I'm learning to listen," I replied. "To engines or people?" Her question hung between us, soft but heavier than it should have been. I didn't answer. She reached for her keys, fingers trembling just once before they steadied. Then she looked at me, really looked. "If something feels dangerous," she said, "maybe it's because it matters." And before I could say a word, she turned and walked out, leaving the faint scent of oil, rain, and her perfume, all tangled together, impossible to separate. The rain had been falling since evening, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that keeps talking to itself, tapping on windows, muttering through gutters. The shop was closed early. The streets were half drowned in quiet. She showed up anyway. "Your light was on," Mara said, pushing the door open. Her coat was damp, hair curling slightly at the ends. "I thought you'd gone home." I hadn't planned to stay, but I couldn't sleep, so I found things to fix. Bolts that didn't need tightening, engines that didn't need checking. I gestured toward the counter. "Couldn't shake the noise." "The rain?" she asked. "The silence." That made her smile, faintly, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes but still softens everything. She set a paper bag on the counter. "Brought you dinner. You'll make yourself sick living off instant noodles." We sat on the edge of the workbench, legs almost touching, eating out of the same carton. The smell of garlic and rain mixed strangely well. She asked if I'd finished the book she'd recommended. I said I tried, but the words blurred after midnight. She said that meant I was reading it right. The conversation wandered, from books to weather to nothing. But the spaces between words grew longer. The air seemed to listen more closely than either of us did. At one point, her hand brushed mine as she reached for a napkin. Neither of us moved it away. The contact was small, almost nothing, but it felt like something had leaned forward inside me, waiting. Then her phone rang. A man's name flashed across the screen. I caught it before she turned it face down. Her expression didn't change, but her shoulders tightened. "You can answer," I said. "I don't need to. Maybe you want to." Her eyes met mine, sharp, then softened. "Eli, not every silence needs filling." She said it gently, but it landed heavy. We sat in the hum of the fluorescent light. The rain pressed harder against the windows. I watched her fingers tap against the counter, small, rhythmic, impatient. The phone buzzed again. "I should go," she said finally. "You don't have to." That made her laugh, barely audible. "You shouldn't make it sound like an invitation." When she stood, the chair legs scraped against the floor, a sound too loud for how close we'd been. She slipped on her coat, fumbling slightly with the buttons. I wanted to help, but I didn't move. "You'll lock up?" she asked. "Yeah." "Good." She took a step toward the door, stopped, and turned back. "You keep looking at me like you're waiting for me to say something I won't." Her voice trembled just enough to betray her calm. I swallowed. "Then say nothing. I'll still hear it." She didn't reply, just stood there, rainlight reflecting off her face, the space between us dense and trembling. For one unbearable second, I thought she might close the distance, and I knew if she did, I wouldn't stop her. But she didn't. She opened the door instead, the rain swallowing her outline, leaving the scent of wet air and unspoken things. And I stayed there, still feeling the ghost of her touch on my hand, like a confession that never found its voice. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It never was with her. She walked into the shop just before closing. No car this time. No excuse. The sky outside was bruised with evening, the kind of dim that makes everything look a little more honest. She didn't say hello, just leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me wipe my hands. The smell of metal and rain lingered between us. "Are you avoiding me?" she asked finally. I looked up, caught off guard. I didn't think I was allowed to. Her laugh was short, empty. "You always turn things into questions when you're scared." I didn't answer that. I just kept busy, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. She walked closer, her heels soft against the concrete. "I keep replaying that night," she said quietly. "The rain, the silence, the way you looked at me." "Nothing happened," I said, too fast. "That's not the point." Her voice cracked just slightly on the word point, as if she'd run out of ways to reason with herself. I turned toward her, slowly. Her eyes met mine, steady, searching, a little broken. "What are we doing, Eli?" she whispered. That question landed like a confession, heavier than anything we'd said before. I took a breath, unsure whether to speak or stay still. The air between us hummed with something unsustainable, the kind of silence that forces you to look at yourself. "I don't know," I said finally. "You come here. You leave. I wait. That's all I know." She closed her eyes, and for a moment, her face looked younger, softer, almost frightened. "You think this is waiting? It's drowning." Her hands gripped the counter's edge like she needed to hold on to something solid. The fluorescent light above flickered once, and her shadow trembled across the wall. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "You make things complicated." "I don't say anything," I replied. "That's exactly why." We stood there, both unwilling to move first. I wanted to reach for her, to prove something I couldn't name, but every inch between us felt like a border we'd both drawn and forgotten how to erase. Her breathing slowed, shallow and deliberate. She looked at the floor, then back up. "You remind me of who I was before I stopped believing in second chances." That line cut through everything. I stepped forward, not enough to touch, just enough to feel the warmth radiating off her, to know how close almost could feel. "If I'm dangerous," I said softly, "then why do you keep coming back?" Her eyes flickered, a tear she refused to let fall. "Because you listen like you're the only one who ever could." And with that, she turned away. No anger, no goodbye, just the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall, leaving a silence that said everything we weren't brave enough to. For a long time, I just stood there, the echo of her words unraveling in my chest. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to be both the danger and the one who takes the risk. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of quiet afternoon that feels like it's holding its breath. The shop was closed, but I was there anyway, pretending to clean. She called before I could lock up. "Can I stop by?" Her voice was calm, too calm. I told her yes, even though I knew I shouldn't. When she arrived, she wasn't wearing her usual guarded look. There was something looser about her, not softness, but surrender. She carried a small envelope in her hand, folded and worn, like something she'd been meaning to throw away for years but couldn't. "Before you say anything," she began, setting it on the counter, "I need to tell you something." I didn't move. She took a deep breath. "You remind me of him." The sentence landed like a wrong note played in a familiar song. "Who?" I asked, my voice too small. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't belong to the present. "My brother. He was 25 when he died. Motorcycle accident. He used to fix engines, too. Same way you do, like you're trying to listen to what the machine isn't saying." Her hand hovered over the envelope. "He wrote me a letter before it happened. I never opened it. I thought if I didn't, it wouldn't be real." I stayed quiet. She kept talking, her words trembling at the edges. "When I saw you again, I thought it was nostalgia, a trick of memory. But it wasn't. You look at people the way he did, like you already know how they'll hurt you." She looked up then, meeting my eyes. "That's why I've been pushing you away. It's not about danger. It's about remembering." I didn't know what to say. All I could think about was that envelope between us, the way it sat there like a witness. "Have you read it?" I asked. She shook her head. Do you want to? Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Not alone. We sat side by side on the stool near the back wall, the hum of the old fridge filling the silence. She tore the edge of the envelope slowly, carefully, as if the paper might shatter. Her eyes scanned the letter once, twice. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, he wrote, "Stop waiting for life to be safe. It never will be." She let out a breath that sounded more like a sob held too long. "I've been living like everything after him was a rehearsal," she whispered. "And you made me forget the script." She handed me the letter. I didn't read it. Not yet. Outside, the sun had slipped behind a bank of clouds, the light turning the air silver. She looked at me, exhausted, relieved, exposed. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thin. "You never asked to be someone's memory." I wanted to tell her I didn't mind, that I'd rather be remembered than forgotten, but I couldn't find the words. So I just reached out, and without touching her, said quietly, "Then let me be something new." She looked at me like she didn't believe she deserved to hear that, and maybe that was the moment everything truly shifted. The letter stayed on the counter for a week before either of us mentioned it again. She didn't call. I didn't, either. But the silence between us stopped feeling empty. It felt paused, like breath before a word. Then one evening, she appeared again, without warning. The sky was fading into that soft, colorless dusk where day can't decide whether to leave. She stood at the doorway, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat, her expression unreadable. "You weren't going to call me," she said. I shook my head. "Didn't want to interrupt anything you were trying to forget." She smiled faintly. "You give too much credit to forgetting. It's never as clean as people think." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The sound of it latching felt final, somehow, like something small and long overdue had just ended. We didn't talk much. She sat on the same stool near the window, the one she'd always taken when pretending she was just visiting. I made coffee, because doing something with my hands felt easier than meeting her eyes. After a while, she said, "I read it again. The letter." I turned. She wasn't looking at me. "I think I finally understand what he meant." Her voice softened. "He didn't mean life wasn't safe. He meant love isn't. Any of it. And we spend so long waiting for a version that won't hurt." She paused, glanced up at me. "But it always does, doesn't it?" I didn't answer. I just moved closer, resting against the counter beside her. We were close enough to share breath, but not warmth. Not yet. There was no grand moment. No music swelling, no cinematic light. Just the hum of the old fridge, the faint crackle of the coffee pot cooling, and the sound of her breathing, steady but tired. She reached for the mug, fingers brushing mine, and this time, neither of us pulled away. Her thumb lingered against my hand, tracing the edge of a small oil stain on my skin. "This is messy," she whispered. "It's real," I said. She exhaled slowly, and I watched her shoulders drop, like she'd been holding herself together for years and finally stopped trying. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. Not a surrender, not a confession, just a quiet acceptance that we were both done pretending. We stayed that way, not talking, not defining anything. The shop smelled of coffee and rain, the night pressing softly against the windows. At some point, I reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't move. "I don't know what happens next," I murmured. "Neither do I," she said, voice low. "But for once, that doesn't scare me." Her words landed like the gentlest kind of truth, small, irrevocable, enough. And as the silence settled around us, she turned her hand palm up on my knee, fingers open, not asking, not offering, just there. So I placed mine over hers, and for the first time, it didn't feel like risk. It felt like home, disguised as uncertainty. It's strange, looking back now, how something that began with hesitation ended up reshaping the quiet parts of me. Months have passed since that night in the shop. The air's warmer now, and the rain feels softer when it comes. I still fix engines, still keep the same hours. But sometimes, in the middle of a job, I'll pause and realize I'm listening differently. Not just to the machine, to myself. Mara still visits, though not the way she used to. No tension folded into every word, no pretending it's coincidence. Sometimes she brings a book, sometimes coffee, sometimes nothing at all. We've stopped explaining why. There's a kind of peace in that, in knowing something doesn't have to be named to be real. She laughs more now. It's quieter, gentler, but it reaches her eyes. The first time I noticed that, I realized how much she'd been holding herself back from the world, from joy, from risk, from connection. And maybe that's what we gave each other, without meaning to, permission. There's still distance between us, and I think we both like it that way. It's the kind of space that lets things breathe. Some days, she reads while I work. Other days, we just sit in silence. It's not romantic, not dramatic. It's human. She once told me she opened another letter her brother had left behind, one she found years later, hidden in a book. It was blank, just paper. She said maybe that was his way of saying life doesn't always give you words, only moments. I like that. I've learned that love, if that's even what this is, doesn't always arrive loud or certain. Sometimes it comes as a slow correction, a quiet shift in how you see the world. It teaches you that some people aren't meant to fix you or be fixed, just to meet you in the middle of your own unfinishedness. She taught me that it's okay to care without control, that wanting someone doesn't have to mean owning their story. And maybe I taught her that being seen doesn't have to hurt. The last time she left, she touched my shoulder, just once, and said, "You listen better now." I told her, "That's because you taught me how." She smiled, walked out, and for once, I didn't feel that familiar ache of her absence. Just gratitude that it happened at all. If there's anything this story proves, it's that danger and tenderness sometimes wear the same face. That love, real love, doesn't always end in forever. Sometimes it ends in understanding. And maybe that's enough. So if you're still here, listening, tell me, have you ever met someone who changed you quietly, without ever trying to? Because that's what she did. And I think, in her own way, she'd say I did, too.